Last week, we talked about the significance of the Palestinian-Israel conflict, specifically the Hamas-Israel conflict. This week, we're going to be talking about the history on Hamas, on Palestine, and on Israel. And Mr. Charlie's put up a good roadmap, and we're going to be talking about it, going through it. Jonathan Fiala, your host for Further Every Day, and sitting in the chair of culture today, but to my far right, I got Miss Nikki. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. If you can't tell, I've got a little bit of chest congestion, so I sound a little bit. Well,
Yes.
We have spread it around.
Yeah.
But I think it's allergies because there's no fever. It's like the Saharan dust is in the air again.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's been pretty different in the weather. Had quite the change.
Yeah, definitely.
Sitting to my right again, a little bit closer, is Mr. Charlie.
Greetings to all.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And yes, technically he's in the chair of philosophy, but we are kind of just doing a more standard. It's a little bit different day. It's a little bit chill. And then to my left, I got Mr. Steve.
Yes.
How's it going, sir?
And block 3. But I'm going to step outside my boundaries and be politically incorrect today.
And you're sitting in the chair of politics anyway.
Yep, that's right. And got my Jerusalem hat, so I'm going to be rocking and rolling
solidarity
today
with the Jewish people. Yeah, he's doing a choo-choo train for those of you in auto. Just those are
going to be moving down the road.
So we got a lot of ground to cover. Actually, about 4,000 years, 5,000 years worth of ground to cover. So I want to start with Miss Nikki, and we're going to start. Mr. Charlie here thought it'd be a good idea to go ahead and start from the question of, first off, where did the Jewish people come from in the first place? Like, where is their heritage? How did they come to be?
Well, this will go back to biblical times when God called out Abraham and promised Abraham that he was going to make him a great nation through his seed. And Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob, and God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and all his descendants are Israel. And that's the Jewish nation.
And so you and I were talking about this off mic earlier, but a lot of the secular and a lot of the Palestinian sources that we were researching for this show do not really talk about it from the framework of the Abrahamic covenant.
Correct.
And the Abrahamic land deeds. By the way, land that was owned and was known to be owned by the Abrahamic seed.
Correct.
Even while they were in Egypt, in the captivity in Egypt in the 14,400. What was it? No. What was it? It was 1445 is the estimated exodus from Egypt, right? So
should be 1445 BC.
BC, correct.
Yeah.
Just for those who didn't catch that.
Yeah.
So why are we going back all the way to Abraham when we discuss the issues of today?
Well, you will never understand the issues that's going on over there in the Middle East until you understand the history of it. And you have to go back. The Jewish people are just practicing what they deem to be what God gave them back in the Old Testament. If you want to understand the crisis, you've got to understand the true religious history of the people. And you're missing it. If you're taking that part out, you're missing it.
And to add on to that real quick, I just thought about this. One of the interesting aspects about this whole conflict, many people that do not subscribe to any type of religion, if you will, they look at the Bible as more of a storybook. If there was anything that actually put reality into the storybook, it's this conflict. And I really appreciate what you brought out there, because that goes way, way back. There was a video that Nikki and I had looked at earlier this week online, and they wanted to go back the last 100 years to look at this conflict. Folks, you would be extremely foolish to do that.
But even then, Israel's position is still 100% defensible.
Oh, Oh, totally.
Correct.
Totally.
You know,
Even if you go back.
I've heard people that don't ascribe to a religion or anything refer to the Bible as, say, folklore.
Yes.
It's not anything to believe. It's just something
Make you
just
feel good
whatever.
stories.
Yeah. It's just folklore is all it is.
And
And
the
I'm
Bible's
like,
batting
what?
average is still 1,000. Every time they say that David didn't exist or Solomon didn't exist, all these
Right.
other cultures that are in the Bible didn't exist. Every time you give it enough time, the archaeologists, scientists, historians all ultimately climb the mountain, finally to find the theologian who's been sitting there for ages.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
that's part of the issue. And we're going to kind of dig into how Israel has been displaced and placed over the years. And I do want to get to that. But the next question that we laid out, and I'm going to ask Mr. Charlie to ask this and to lay it out, is in regards to Palestine. Why is it important to note where Israel started and then where Palestine started? Because that's an important question. You're kind of in the chair of philosophy here.
Yeah.
I want you to ask your wife that question, but also why is it important to do that? Because she's got the goods there.
So she's
her
brought out the start, if you will, for the Jewish people. What everyone has to understand is what was the start of the quote unquote Palestinian people. And that's the issue that we want to go deeper with. So what did you find on that?
Well, I did find many resources, but the resources that seem to be in agreement is what I'm going to bring out. Because there was some resources that brought out something different, but I this resource here and a couple others seem to be in agreement, and I think they had a better foundation. So the word Palestine is derived from an Egyptian and Hebrew word. You help me, Palashat. Okay, so it's roughly translated to mean rolling or migratory. The term was used to describe the inhabitants of the land to the northeast of Egypt, and that would be the Philistines. So if any of you ever heard the story of David and Goliath, Goliath was a Philistine. So the conflict between these two people go way, way back. And it was a battle for land back then.
And so
Go ahead.
just to, if I could just interrupt you here real quick, something that people ought to understand is that when the children of Israel were captive in Egypt and they were being led out, where was God taking them? They wandered in the desert for 40 years, but that wasn't the purpose. It wasn't to make them wander around for 40 years. There was some disobedience there, and God had made some judgment on them. But it was the result of the disobedience for... Now you can go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to go on to the Philistines in their history, where they were an Aegean people more closely related to the Greeks, with no connection ethnically, linguistically, or historically.
Hysterically, too.
Yeah, historically, with Arabia, who conquered the Mediterranean coastal plain that is now Israel and Gaza in the 12th century BC.
So this was referred to as the land flowing with milk and honey. This is the promised land. This is the land that God told Moses, I am going to take my children, my people, to a land flowing with milk and honey, and it will be their home. And that, folks, is really where this all stems from. Who was in that land? Philistines were part of that land. And they were the ones that were eventually conquered. And the children of Israel ended up there.
So when, I'm not going to go into the timeline, but the time that the Romans had conquered this part of the world, which included Israel, they actually they expelled the Jews from Judea, and then they created
Most of them.
most of them. But then they created this land for the it's called Palestina. And the reason behind it was to crush the national and religious spirit of the Jews. And many Jews did flee at that time.
Yes.
So that is our history there of how these, two countries.
So
that land has been fought over for so long.
And this right here is a map actually of Palestine during the monarchy. Go ahead and show us. So this is again pre/during Christ. So you have Judah in the south, and you have Israel up here. This is pre-Christ. Now go ahead and go to the next map, please, just so that you guys can see this. If you're on audio, I do apologize. We are actually showing some maps here, and it is helpful to see. We'll try to describe these real quick. This one is what happened after Christ. So during the time when the Jews were largely driven out, there are still people who've been there the whole time. There are some Levites who actually do have manuscripts that they have since at least the time of Christ, have been stowing and recording and maintaining some of the documents. But this is all Jewish land. And again, this is under the Ottoman Empire. You can see that each one of these was turned into a state. I think you call that a sanjak. So that's important to note, that it was indeed conquered by several different rulers, and that's going to become really relevant in a moment. Remember I said going back 100 years does not take away the argument from Israel.
That's correct.
It doesn't. So go to the next one, please, sir. All right. So coming up, and Miss Nikki, stop me if you were going to cover some of this.
No.
Okay.
Good.
So now, finally, under the British Empire, and we were just talking about empires a little while ago, how America is a very different sort of empire than the British and all the other ones that came before it. But what the Brits did is they would conquer areas and rule over them and protect them. And so they would actually subdivided this area out from Palestinia. They call it Palestine. And they created this space. It was under British rule. That is very important to note, because guess what? They had the right to do whatever they wanted to. And this was set up at the 1920 convention at San Remo.
And John Arthur, real quick, I'm not sure this is real critical, but it is interesting to note. I believe the French had a part in this as well. That division that the British had created, they had kind of done it from a northern side, if you will, and the French had done it from a southern into an eastern area.
Take a look.
There we go.
Take a look. Yeah. So Syria was from the French mandate, and that was what. Let's get through this. It's very boring. I know it's very droll, but there's a reason why we're going through it, so that you have all of the answers, dear viewer, listener, that to explain it. So what we're looking at right here, for those on audio who cannot necessarily see this, highly recommend you look it up on YouTube, Rumble. Eventually we'll go on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. You have straight down the Jordan. Yep. You have Palestine, and then you have the Transjordan British mandates. Okay. And you have the beginning of what we start to see an incursion into what was Israel's in the form of the West Bank territory. And so this was defined and divided. The Great Britain's division of the mandated area in 1921 through 1923 is where they ended up. Now, you've got a color-coded map here. By the way, links in the description. As always, you want to go check all this stuff out. But what you can see is that this is what was given to the Jews. What you have on the left is very indicative of what was given to the Jews in 1947. After the horrors of the Holocaust, what did we decide as a world? We said, look, the Jews were kind of the ones that they were the primary targets. So they need a place. Guess what? We own Palestine, said the British Empire. Guess what they had the right to do?
Give that land up.
They had every right to give that land to a nation that has owned that land for years and years and years, and then was taken captive, conquered. The new conqueror comes in and says, no, we're giving this land back to the people who originally owned. By the way, all of you affected people who think that you should call this, America First People's Land. For those of you who speak English, who think that the Indians should get their land back, you should be thanking Israel and Great Britain for this. Thank you, Mr. Producer. That's enough of that for now. But you should be thanking Britain for this. It's Nikki.
Well, I do want to point out, John Arthur, I don't know if you're going to touch on this or not, but there was called a Zionist movement, and it was Jewish people. Jewish people were scattered abroad throughout the world, and mainly in Europe, but some in Africa. And they were persecuted. And not the Holocaust is a horrible thing, but there were many times that people within a country would rise up against the Jew and kill them and try to chase them out. Even England expelled the Jews. France expelled the Jews. So the Zionist movement was about the Jews saying if we had our own place, we would be safe.
Yes.
That's what that was about. And that movement started, and it was in 1948 when they finally, the right people got on board and gave this land to Israel.
Well, you've actually celebrated a Passover Seder.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to know.
Yes.
A couple of them. And at the end of the Seder, what if you are not living in Jerusalem, what is the cry at the end of every Passover Seder? Next year.
Oh.
In Jerusalem.
Next year in Jerusalem.
And
yes.
the implication is when Messiah has come.
Yes.
And they have been saying next year in Jerusalem for 2,000 years. Maybe even before if you weren't living in Jerusalem at the time.
Yeah.
Tradition has it. So they have been yearning for a land. And it is a miracle
Yes,
that Israel even exists.
That's correct. In the book, Jews, Gentiles, and the Church, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the author's name, but he points out, and the way he describes it, it is very clear the fact that Israel has been restored to the promised land is a miracle. That should give you every reason to believe there is a God.
Correct. So one of the things to note is that you had the War of 1948, where after all of this land was allocated, what happened? Israel said, okay, we'll give you the West Bank. Okay? Give you the West Bank. Just leave us alone. The two-state solution started the year after Israel was formed because they were being driven out of existence. And there's a spiritual reason for that, and we're going to get to it. They were being driven out of existence 1 year after being formed. This is in the shadow of the Holocaust. Keep that in mind. And the nations there, the Palestinians, wanted Israel to be deceased. Then you had which war came after that? You remember?
67.
60. I was in the
Six-Day War of 1967. Yep. And then, of course, what did they do? They gave him the Gaza Strip.
I was going to say that war. They took a pretty good chunk of land in that.
They went all the way down to Egypt.
And that's what the peace accords were all about at the time of Jimmy Carter. For those of you that are old enough to remember that, that's what that was all about. That land was given back to Egypt.
They were putting it on Egypt.
Yeah, and they were, and that's the amazing thing. If you really want to do a little bit more of a deep dive, folks, in understanding a little bit more of the more recent Israel history, take a look at the 6-Day War, because that war was absolutely unreal. Egypt, for all intents and purposes, should have walked all over Israel, should have easily won that, and they did not. They suffered a massive defeat, and the leader of Egypt was a nut. I mean, he should have been removed immediately for what he did. Because basically what he did was he just made a determination: we're going to go take this land. We're gonna kill them.
And along with a few other countries.
Yes, there was three countries that actually came against
Egypt,
them.
and then you had Jordan and Syria.
To Charlie's point, I want to pull this up real quick because we hadn't actually set this up, but what you see
that's a
on
good
the
graphic.
far left is the 1946 grant, if you will, and Palestinian land. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The green is the Palestinian land, and the white is the Jewish land. Jews were never fully gone. And then the UN plan, you see what was given to Israel. Then, of course, they really came after the Jews. So what did the Israelis do? They defeated them, and then they gave them the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And then all the way up till to 2010, which is kind of representative of what you see now. On the West Bank, you see a lot of settlements. Okay? And then, of course, you have the Gaza Strip. And Israel... Thank you, Mr. Producer, for pulling that up real quick. Israel has wildly given back just huge amounts of land. Like, that doesn't happen. That no nation wins a genocidal war
And gives land back.
and gives land back. Let me rephrase that. The victim of a genocidal war never gives land back. That does not happen, except in Israel's case. Very, very unprecedented.
And not only that, a lot of people don't realize what Israel has done over the last 10, 20 years alone. And some may have heard Ben Shapiro talk about this a little bit, but this is key to understand. The Israelis have provided the people down on the Gaza Strip a lot of sustenance, if you will. They've given them the ability to work. They've put in infrastructure. And the thing is, the people on the Gaza Strip have taken all that has been given and have put it to use for this war, for this conflict.
To destroy Israel, like we showed last week with them literally cutting out water, and they're whining and crying about water. Sorry, I'm struggling to keep that nice. They're crying about having no water for their children, and they were the ones that dug up a water pipe that was laid by the UN and by Israel, and by the United States aid, and they're turning it into rockets to send it to Israel. It's like there's no equivalence. So let's wind back for just a moment to the history of Israel. So you alluded to, again, 1900 BC. You want me to do the timeline, or do you want to do the timeline?
Go ahead.
So you've got Abraham chosen by God, okay, in 1900 BC. And you have the exodus into Egypt due to a famine. They parked their land. By the way, people still knew that land was owned by Israel in 1850 BC. About 1445, give or take. Some people say 1230. They're wrong, but that's a whole nother issue with Egyptology. We'll leave that be. 1445 BC, the Israelites went back, and unfortunately, they had people who had come in and taken up their land. Okay, land that was owned by them, and they knew that it was owned by them. Now, Israel reconquered their land. By the way, that's how things were done back then. You had to kill if you wanted land. It's kind of sad.
And that includes every tribe that lived back then.
Yep, that's all of them. That's how business was done. In 1010 BC, you have David. By the way, people didn't believe in David. People said that David was a fantasy, right? They said that he didn't exist. It's folklore. What? Yeah, they did, Mr. Producer. And in truth, they say that that's one of the reasons why the Bible was wrong. However, we have archaeological evidence now that supports King David
and Solomon. I heard people have talked about Solomon being
absolutely. So 1010 BC, we have King David unites the 12 tribes of Israel. In 970 BC, we have King Solomon, son of David, builds the first temple. Okay. 930, Israel's divided into two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. That was the first map that we showed, was kind of post where those two kingdoms were sort of right around the Babylonian, Assyrian exiles. In 722, the kingdom of Israel is conquered by the Assyrians. In 605, the kingdom of Judah is conquered by the Babylonians. Now, they come back. The Jews come back to Israel at 538 BC. Temple is rebuilt in about 8 years, in 520 before Christ. The reforms by Ezra put in place, and then you see the raiders come in. The Greeks conquer the Persian Empire, who has been occupying up until now, in about 333 BC, and the Egyptian and Syrian Empire take over in 323 after a short battle with the Greeks, because the Greeks were kind of fading out at that point before the Romans came in. Okay, the Hasmoneans recaptured Israel, and the Jews ruled independently in 167 BC, but then the Romans in 70 BC came in and conquered. Then, of course, 70 AD, after Christ, the Romans, with legions that were conscripted from Syria, Proto-Iranians, or Assyria, rather, they came in and sacked Jerusalem. And these people the Jews were captives of the Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Crusaders, and eventually they were occupied by Great Britain. All the stuff that we just laid out. These people have been here in this land for a long, long time. Their land was given to them by the British. And again, why are we doing all this? Because when people say, well, the Palestinians were there first. No, they weren't. You didn't need them to be first either, because Great Britain was the one that gave them the land, and they weren't the ones who attacked 1 year. 1 year after the so-called Palestinians were the ones who attacked 1 year after the formation of the new state by Britain. Yes,
Yeah,
Steve.
what a lot of people don't understand is that the original Palestinians were wiped out. I mean, they were completely wiped out at the time, thousands of years ago, and I'm not sure back during David's time or sometime, I believe, and they were completely wiped out, and there were no more around whatsoever.
I think one of the
Philistines
things,
Yeah, correct, Philistine.
one of the important aspects of this, though, too, an objective person looks at this and goes, well, why did Israel keep losing their land? Folks,
Good question.
This is a situation where God is trying to teach his people something, and it's called obedience, and it's called worship the one and only true God. And this is where people today still have an issue. They don't want to do that. And guess what? The children of Israel were no different. And they would disobey, they would get attacked, and they would lose. Because God's not going to stand with that. He's not going to stand with sin.
Let me put a different tack on
Sure.
it for a moment. I'm not contradicting you per se. I want to put a different tack on it.
Yep.
Why do the Jews keep losing their land? It's a really good question. And yes, obedience would have saved them. But that's not the reason why they keep losing their land. The reason, if they had acted obediently, God would have protected them. Noted, correct, and God wants them to learn obedience. But why is there an attack on the Jews so specifically, so harshly, so incredibly? It's because Satan himself does not want there to be a Jerusalem and a Jewish population for Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, to come back in. And he does not want there to be a Mount of Olives for Jesus to touch down on.
Correct.
He does not want there to be an Easter. He doesn't want that gate open. He doesn't want any of this to exist. If Satan can defeat God in prophecy, He has one on the scoreboard. And actually, he's proven that God's not all powerful.
And I was listening to
That's a great addition there.
yes,
That is really good.
an evangelist who is a Jew, and he's from Israel. And he said and made it very clear, and Christians, you need to listen to this. Prophecy is not for the Christian. Prophecy is about the Jew. Everything that's been in the Bible that talks about the future is about the Jew, the Jewish people. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The sun rises and it falls for the covenant that God has with Israel. Now we're in the hour of grace, the hour of the church, where other people can get saved through Jesus Christ and be engrafted in. But the sun rises and falls for that covenant that God made with Israel. They are his chosen people, and he has not forgotten his word, and he's not afraid of other people's opinions and their religious beliefs.
Indeed. So I actually want to kind of pull back now. So now that we've built, I think, between Miss Nikki and Shirley and I, we built like a really good foundation. Hopefully, you feel like you can kind of defend this now. Links in the description if you want to actually go search this out.
Wait a minute.
I want to go to Steve.
I feel like I'm outside this foundation.
Because I want to go to Steve.
Kind of like
No, you're
Steve
next.
hanging on out here. Wait a minute.
Because Steve hasn't done much talking yet. I want to get over to Steve. And that's exactly what I'm saying, because we haven't really let you talk yet. Because the Palestinian leadership is kind of an interesting cat on this stage. And what I think a lot of people fail to realize is what is driving the Palestinian governance. What is driving them? Why? What do they want out of this conflict? What does Hamas want? What does Hezbollah? And by the way, Hamas, Hezbollah, you can draw an equal
Palestine,
sign.
you can
ISIS.
Yeah, you can put whatever name you want, but they're all the same.
So what do they want out of this?
They want the complete and total destruction of not just Israel, but the Jewish people as a whole. Is
Every
what they
single
want.
one of them.
All of them. They want them gone. Period.
So
Completely destroyed.
why? What do they have to gain from that? Couple things. This is their belief is that they're going to gain back what they lost from the Bible, and they're going to get an inheritance out of it, and they're going to get land. So yeah, let's start with the economics of this. Is that they're going to get land, and they're going to get right now land that's a lot more beautiful than theirs. By the way, that's because they do a good job taking care of their land. The Jews do.
And I've been over there, and all the land they live on dies.
It's amazing. You're driving through, it's green, lush irrigation that looks gorgeous and beautiful. And then you turn and you go into Palestinian land, and it looks like desert. And trash.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's a covetousness there, but there's something about the Abrahamic covenant that's interesting. And even though these people aren't the descendants of Ishmael, they do come from that Mohammedan side.
Right.
Where they have that belief. So
they carry that belief.
What's so important about the spiritual aspect of this, Steve?
The spiritual aspect is that, they have the Muhammad, and theirs is not a Jesus belief, to where they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. They believe where Muhammad is their prophet, their savior, and that he's the one that saves you, and then you go and have all of these women that are, virgins you're going to have when you die, if for whatever reason that you do something for.
And what did the Hadith say about the people of the book?
I'm not super familiar with the Hadith.
Said to kill the people of the book. Give the Christians
correct.
a chance.
Correct.
But the Jews, they're filthy. Kill them.
Kill them all.
Kill them. Kill those Jews.
All of them. All the infidels.
I'm quoting the Book of Peace, y'all. Get off me, Media Matters. I'm quoting the Book of Peace.
And that's what they say it is, the Book of Peace.
Yeah. And the
And
Hadiths.
Correct me if I'm wrong, John Arthur. I think we provided a link for the very document that Hamas is working from.
Not yet, actually.
I will get that for you.
Go ahead and put that in.
And I would encourage you all to take a look at this because the language in it is very clear. You do not need to be a lawyer to read this stuff. This is their charter, if you will, their constitution, if you will. This is they do it up in what they call articles, and these articles make it very clear the utter destruction of Israel is what is required. And we're not talking about just taking the land. We are talking about killing every single Jewish person.
Right. So I'm actually asking Mr. Producer right now to pull it up for me, if he'd be so kind, because I think it would be very good. You actually just did the first one. The goal of the Islamic resistance movement is a distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah.
Yeah.
And whose way of life is Islam, that strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine. Go ahead and pull it out. Highlight as I read, if you would, Mr. Producer. A little bit of a collaborative exercise here. On the destruction of Israel is the second bullet point. Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. This is the preamble. Exclusive Muslim nature of the area. The land of Palestine is an Islamic Waqf, holy possession, consecrated for the future or for future Muslim generations until Judgment Day. No one can renounce any part of it or abandon it, etc. Palestine is an Islamic land. Since this is the case, the liberation of Palestine is an individual duty for every Muslim, wherever he may be. They have it called jihad, which is holy war. In the face of the Jews' usurpation, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad, violent warfare, be raised. Ranks will close, fighters will join other fighters, and masses everywhere in the Islamic world will come forward to respond to the call of duty, loudly proclaiming, "Hail to jihad." This cry will reach the heavens and will go on being resounded until liberation is achieved, the invaders vanquished, and Allah's victory comes about. Allah's victory, by the way, meaning a caliphate.
Yeah.
A one world government underneath Islam.
Right.
That's what they want. If it's not one world, it's as big as it can be until it becomes one world.
That right there is an excellent point, because a lot of people, especially those that are taking the side of Hamas in this thing, they do not understand what is really behind the movement by Hamas. If you really read through those articles,
Read the whole thing.
read the whole thing. What's ultimately the destination is for you, supporter of Hamas, who doesn't necessarily agree with the Muslim religion, is total control over you, and you will be a Muslim whether you want to be or not. And if you decide not to, you will be killed.
By the way, gay Jews who stand with
You have no chance.
with Hamas.
You have no chance.
If you stand with Palestine and Hamas on this, you won't be standing. You will be taking the flight.
Yeah.
Down the down the
Off
outside
edge.
of the building.
I was going to say on the outside of the building.
I do want to point out here, because one thing that not every Muslim is going to go down this extreme road.
Correct.
Not every Muslim has the stomach for this type of violence.
Agreed.
And you are born a Muslim. Like, we're Christians. We accepted Christ. In the time we accepted Christ, we became a Christian. My children were not born were born in a Christian home, but that did not make them a Christian. You're born as a Muslim. You may not practice the Muslim religion as extremely as what some of these other people are practicing it. So let's just make it very clear that this is not speaking to everyone who holds Muslim as their religious belief, because some of those people do not have the stomach for what is happening.
Well stated.
It sounds like, almost like the direction of the Antichrist.
Oh, we're going to get there.
You know what I mean?
We're going to get there in just a
One
moment.
world government.
But before we do, I want to get to Mr. Charlie. And I want to ask you, asking you your question back up. So let me tee this up for you. What exactly is going on with the propaganda war? Because both sides are putting up propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
But propaganda is not a bad thing. It's just what is in the propaganda.
Yep.
Because, look, the United States had some great propaganda movies that I think were necessary during World War II. They also had some really terrible ones, okay? I mean, you go and look up some of those. They were like, this is actually racist, actually icky, actually kind of gross. But some of the propaganda movies were good. So propaganda has value. It's not. It's a moral neutral. But what we're seeing is kind of a perversion of. So what's the definition? And let's go from there.
And I think it's important to note that the propaganda of old versus the propaganda of new, if I could word it like that. Propaganda of old served typically a purpose of good.
A national good.
Yeah. Today, propaganda is served for a small group's agenda, if you will. And many times that agenda is not good. Let me give you a definition here. This is from Merriam-Webster's dictionary that I don't really believe in, but it gives us a good baseline to work with. The spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a purpose, or a person. So one of the things here that in regards to the propaganda that's going on right now, one of the early things that we've seen is Israel bombed a hospital in Gaza. Well, okay. This is where the propaganda of new has become pretty bad. And here's why. Today, our culture is geared such we work a lot on feeling. Well, is it good to bomb a hospital? Well, the moral attitude of many of us would say, that is horrible. What are you doing bombing a hospital? If I put that out, if I'm Hamas and I put that out, what kind of view does that give me of Israel? Pretty negative one. And I might have been standing with Israel before, but on something like that, no, that ain't going to work, guys. Well, that's what Hamas is really doing. They're working very hard, and this is why they use their own people as human shields. Think about that, people. We're fighting a war. We're going to use our own people so that we can make good propaganda movies. That's exactly what's going on here. So was it important to validate who bombed the hospital? You bet it was. And it's important that our major media outlets take a look at these things and not assume a position, which is exactly what they've done. They didn't check the facts or anything. They just assumed a position and said Israel was responsible for that. And a number of them have had to go back and say, we were wrong.
But the damage has already been done.
But it's already been done. So people, you and I, all of us, we need to be extremely careful when we listen to these reports and don't assume anything. We need the facts to be vetted. And there was some today even that came out, and I'm not going to go over them right now. All I'm saying is that the propaganda war is extremely intense. Why? Because it brings about people changing their feelings about one side or the other. Right now, there is a belief by many that Hamas could gain ground in this war just based on feelings.
Mr. Producer, pull up that video for me if you would. So, So speaking about the next generation of war and propaganda, what you're seeing there, make that full screen, please. Come on, bud. Thank you. What you're seeing right here is a video, and those of you on video, you can see this, but for those of you who are on audio only, what you have is a very realistic looking scene of a car burning. It looks like it was bombed in a roadway. But really what it is this is something called Unreal Engine. This is what I use for work. Okay. I do a lot of CGI work for our marketing company. And you're able to make particle effects. They're waving a pill-shaped object through there just to show that this is a simulation. this looks real and this is done in real time. You can actually have someone walking on that street in real time. That's the stuff that I do for work. I have mixed reality that works this well. This is what you're facing with fifth generation warfare is propaganda.
Yes.
Believable propaganda.
It looks real. It looks real. Thank you, Mr. Producer. It looks real. And the thing that you said about making sure that we verify. Thing is everyone who has half a wit knows that, and they pay attention and they vet their news sources, knows that Hamas failed a rocket launch and bombed their own hospital. But there are millions of Americans walking around. Excuse me, today. Again, that phlegm's really getting to me. There are millions of Americans walking around right now who actually think Israel bombed a hospital because they only read the headline.
That's right.
And hours, not just minutes, hours after it was confirmed, you still have people like Representative Rashida Tlaib. You have people like BBC saying, well, of course, it's more. I mean, what else would we believe? Of course, it was Israel who bombed it. I mean, there's no other explanation. Says this BBC anchor, and this is after the fact, after they knew. It's not that they're wrong; it's that they're lying.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point right there. It's the issue of intentionally doing it now. It's no longer and you've got media doing it. That's what I'm trying to bring out. Is the mainstream media is actively participating in it willfully.
Yes, Steve, I know you wanted to throw something in there.
I was watching a news article, and there was a gentleman that was on who had been dealing. It was a Black Ops guy, and he had become a news reporter and reported on a lot of things in the Middle East and done a lot of Black Ops stuff in various countries in the Middle East. That was his specialty. And what he was saying, and he'd been over there reporting on the Israel conflict with Hamas and what was going on in the Gaza Strip. And he was saying that half of the rockets that Hamas launches land on their own people.
That was
half
the one I
of
wasn't
them.
going to bring up. That's the one.
And
half
that's,
of them.
And that's what Jason was talking about last week. The sheer lack of value on human life. It's not about human life. Because guess what? All those people died as martyrs for all they care. So they're now in heaven. Right? So all those people died as martyrs. They're all part of the cause, even the children.
Exactly.
And it's...
And all they'll do is just blame it on Israel.
By the way, when I told you I was listening to the evangelist that was from Israel, and he was saying, when you die a martyr for Islam, and this is something too, if you're going to pay attention to the Middle East, you got to understand their culture and their religious beliefs. A martyr, if you die a martyr for the cause of Islam, and this is what Hamas believes that they're doing, this is the cause of Islam, that you immediately go to heaven with no judgment. You get to drink alcohol in heaven. You get to do pleasurable things. You get the 30 virgins. 72 virgins that, they're 30 years old. I forgot about it. They're 30 years old, yeah. But here's the big thing.
30 years.
I thought Muhammad liked to be younger, but anyway, keep going.
Okay, here's the major thing, is that if you die a martyr, you get to pick 50 family members that get to go to heaven. Now, if you're a parent and you hear about these 6-year-olds or these little kids that have bombs tied to them and they're sent over to the enemy, that parent is thinking, I'm putting my child immediately into heaven and they're securing my place in heaven.
Yep.
You have to think, if you don't understand the religious beliefs, you're not going to understand the conflict.
It's foolish. It's foolish to to even attempt to comment without looking at the spiritual side. Because what you don't understand is that the Jews believe they have a spiritual inheritance there. What you also believe is that the Hamas has a spiritual investment that they're making.
Yes.
And we tried to play the video. It was in the link in the description for last week's episode. Go check it out. Of a man attempting to get his 5-year-old to commit jihad and die on Israeli soldiers.
I think I need to clarify. I said younger. I meant like at least 5 or 6.
Oh, and
I don't want that
And the
to
virgins?
get misunderstood.
Well, Muhammad's daughter, wife, Aisha, was 6 years old.
That's why I don't want this to be misunderstood.
He was gracious enough to not consummate the marriage until they were 9. For those of you who don't know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. That's why I wanted to make a point of that.
But anyway, with that said, not all Muslims, and by the way, I got a lot of family members and friends who are Muslim, and I know that that's not you. I know that that's not you. I'm not talking about you.
No, we're talking about the extreme beliefs that cause this violent action. And,
Hamas, Hezbollah, not talking about Muslims. I'm not saying if you're a Muslim that you are a bad person. I think that you are in the wrong spiritual belief system. I think that you have it wrong, and I think you need to figure that out quickly. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean that I don't care for you and wish the best for you. What I do not think is best is jihad. I think that that's bad. So, but propaganda, it's not just on the physical, it's not just on the monetary, it's not just on the news, but it's also on the spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think people really don't get, is that there is a spiritual propaganda. And, Masiki was just alluding to it a moment ago about how Satan has put it in front of these people that their best interest is to sacrifice themselves, their children, for eternity. And not an eternity of blessing or benefit, but I'm sorry, if I'm getting 72 virgins and that's what I'm going for, that is not a... What about the virgins? I mean, that's always been my question is, what about the virgins?
Wasn't that same kind of problem Solomon had?
I mean, there's that, but also what about the virgins? So just to wrap up propaganda, there's a spiritual aspect to it.
There is. And the thing is, the only way to work your way through it is to make sure that you stay close to the truth. Truth is so critical. And, there's a lot of people that will they'll bust other people's chops for only watching Fox News, or you only watch this, or you only watch that. Look, folks, I do watch a little bit of Fox News, but that's not my go-to source for truth. And you need to be very suspect of whatever your source is, and you need to do some of your own vetting to make sure something is right or not. And sometimes it'll take multiple organizations. Maybe it'll take multiple people. You should not be banking your truth on any one organization. That should never happen in today's world.
Indeed. Make sure that you are showing yourselves approved, like the Noble Bereans. Mr. Producer, if you could bring up the next clip, please. Because we do want to kind of bring this home, and it always does come back to the Bible for this podcast and this group, because we're trying to make us think critically. So here's a question. What does the Bible have to say about Hamas? Make sure it's the Firefox capture if you're going to do it that way, bud.
Nobody would have thought this would have been in there.
So don't spoil it.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go ahead and listen. Now,
come on,
we could bring it ourselves, or we could let our friend Jonathan Kahn go ahead and elucidate on this. And I think he does a very good job. Is Hamas in the Bible? What does the Bible say about prophecy and Hamas? Is there anything in there? It's a long clip, but we're going to go ahead and let the whole thing run.
Let's see.
Producer.
You go to Israel occasionally. I do, and I'll be there before the tour too. I have to go back and forth, but I'll kind of a spiritual part of this, or the underside of it. First of all, I mean, just to keep always our perspective. Yeah. No matter who it is, no matter what their name is, no matter what the organization is, it's beyond them. This is the enemy. The enemy has tried to destroy the Jewish people for 4,000 years, last 2,000, try to wipe them up in the 20th century. The names keep changing. Hamas, Saddam Hussein, Joseph Stalin, Hitler. It's not based on them. This is a fallen angelic being who is dealing with that enemy that Israel is dealing with, and that is trying to wipe them out because he knows what's coming. So he's trying to wipe them out. But interesting, we just talked before about that one-year Bible and the thing that was appointed for 9/11, which was the Harbinger scripture. But also in every one-year Bible, appointed is another verse, which is Psalm 55, which speaks about destruction. This was appointed for 9/11, and everyone speaks about destruction in the city. And the word that they use for destruction or violence in the city is a word that's an amazing word because it means something in Hebrew and it means something in Arabic. And that word, which means violence or destruction, is the word in the Bible is the word Hamas. The word in the Bible is the word Hamas. In Arabic, it means fanaticism and zeal. In Hebrew, it means destruction and violence. And actually, I'll tell you, it also means, listen to what Hamas means in the Bible. It means damage, cruelty, oppression, unrighteousness, wrongdoing, falsehood, and to act violently. And let me just listen to this, and this is just, by the way, I didn't plan this except that I was told that you were talking about this. So we were upstairs last night. I just looked in the Bible. So let me just share what's here in the Bible. What it says about Hamas. Listen, the word Hamas. Okay, Psalm 25. Consider my enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with a Hamas hatred. Psalm 74:20. Think about the tunnels with Hamas. Think about this. The dark places of the earth are full of the dwelling places of Hamas.
Oh my.
2 Samuel 22. You saved me from Hamas. Psalm 11. But the wicked and he who loves Hamas, the Lord's soul hates. Isaiah 53. Messiah. Listen to this. But it says he had done no Hamas. He's the opposite of Hamas. He had done no violence. Ezekiel 7, Hamas has risen up into a rod of wickedness. Ezekiel 7, the land is full of crimes of blood and the city is full of Hamas. And let me give you one more. There's more.
Actually, just take your time.
No, I want to rush.
This is incredible.
This is revelation.
This is just last night, and the thing is that Obadiah speaks about Esau, the descendants of Esau. He says, it's your shame that you went against your brother Isaac. In other words, and many of the descendants of Esau are linked with these people, with many Arabic people, and they're wonderful. There are wonderful, God-loving Arabic people, but you have that as well. So it says that it's your shame that you went against Isaac. So listen to what it says here. It says this. It says, speaking about the descendants of Esau, for your Hamas against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you. So it's talking about the descendants of Esau. It says your Hamas against them. And now listen to this, last one. This is a promise to Israel. Listen, Isaiah 60. For Hamas shall no more be heard in your land, nor the wasting of destruction in your borders. You'll call your walls salvation and your gates praise.
Okay, thank you. Pause that.
And can I say real quick, John Arthur, I vetted this.
Yes.
And I found this.
Yes.
This is legit.
This is real.
If somebody had just said, had asked me the question, Charlie, is Hamas in the Bible? I would have been able to vet this. He has put a little more to it that I love.
So one of the things that I think it's really important to remember is that God has ordained language.
Yes.
We learn that in Genesis 11.
Yes.
God ordained language. And so I think it's important for us to remember that God is sovereign and that God's word's alive and well. It is a living, breathing document. If you want to be really specific, Jesus is the personification, the personification of truth, also God's word. The fact that we have the book of the Bible is like having a copy of Christ in a way, and a little bit of the DNA of what makes God God. We have an understanding of some of that in God's word. So some of these coincidences are just too strong. Okay,
they're not coincidences
when the language lays out that way. I'm not saying that Hamas is antichrist. Okay, just pause.
No.
Alarm bells
What?
going off. Like, I need that. I need the whoop 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 whoop. That's not what I'm saying. It's anti-Christ, but it's not the antichrist.
That's not what I said either. I said it's antichrist-like.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't even. I wasn't
It's
thinking that you did.
That type of
Yes, it's an antichrist type of thing,
right.
And the whole belief system is juxtaposed. It is a fanatic hatred. If I can combine the Hebrew and the Arabic, right? It is a fanatic hatred of the Jews, and we see that in their charter, which we've gone over today. And again, link in the description below. You can read it. So, what does God say about this issue in His Word? Well, we've already kind of gone over it a little bit.
And boy, he put a nice little
There's a
exclamation
on Hamas. But there will be a day when Jesus Christ comes back to a entrenched, besieged Israel. Who's going to be doing the entrenching and besieging? Well, who did it the last 2 times? The Roman. You might say the Romans. No, the Romans were the ones who paid the money and wanted it done. But who actually did it? The very ancestors of the people who are doing it now. Who did it before then? The very ancestors of the people who are doing it today. There is very much, God likes poetic symbolism. He likes repetition in 3s or 7s. You're going to see 3 temples and 3 destructions. Temple and 3 sackings of Jerusalem. In the middle of the sacking of Jerusalem, Christ will return, this time to save his people. Messiah will come. And they will look on him whom they have pierced. And they will look on him whom they have pierced. So that is hopefully enough to send you off into the week.
This has been very educational.
Thinking about what to say or do when someone says, I support Hamas.
When you say that, you don't understand what you're really saying.
Or you are truly a malevolent person, one or the other.
Well,
I would agree with that.
You know, the Bible talks about the end times and the spirit of deception. And when, at the beginning of, right after Hamas did the attack, they interviewed 2 white girls, because they weren't Arabic girls, they were Americans, and they were on Jihad Day out there, and they were supporting the Palestine. And when the reporter asked the question, well, what about this attack? She goes, oh, well, that's already been proven that that's not true. That was all AI generated. That is a willful ignorance, and it's dangerous.
And it's going to get worse.
It will get much worse.
And you look at the people who are, I'm not talking about vaccinated. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who say, you must be vaccinated at all costs, and everyone in the world must be, and we must hold people down and force them or kill them. That mentality is going to, that herd mentality, that group think. I'm not making an issue on vaccines. I'm not. I'm saying the group mentality of that is what you're going to see carried out against Israel when they have the hour of hate, like in George Orwell. That's going to be turned against Israel. And if we don't change what we're doing here in America, our sons and daughters will be marching on Israel in the battle of Gog and Magog.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a whole nother story there. Because how many Christians are going to pick up a gun and go after a nation that they know that their God is fighting for? I said
sons and daughters. I didn't say us. Because we're going to lose that whole generation if we don't change. Something to think about. Make sure that your eyes are on God.
Oh, boy.
And your eyes are on Israel, and that you're praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yep.
If you like this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much for over 200,000 downloads of the audio. Thank you. And thank you, Rumble. You guys are still popping off there. Again, about 80 people there in Rumble. Small. Yeah, you found it. Mr. Producer found it. By the way, I wish you could have seen Mr. Producer's face when Jonathan Kahn was going through the prophecy. His mind was exploding over there.
Lit up like a Christmas tree.
He's like, whoa. He was just looking at the screen really big.
Wow, man.
So thank you, Rai, for being there and producing. And again, we are on X at Further Every Day. Look us up there. Tweet us.
We're Xing now.
Make sure it's something particularly mean or atrocious, and if it's vile enough, it'll make it on the show, and we'll talk about it.
All right.
So with that said, thank you so much. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, one more thing for you.
Okay.
If you're still here, you are a super listener, or we did put you to sleep. Going around the room, yes or no? Cat herding, I tell you. Going around the room, yay or nay? You get a full expense paid trip to go to Israel right now.
No.
Would you? Nikki, no.
I'd be very tempted to do it.
I think I might. I think I would.
Yeah.
Steve?
Yep.
Yeah.
If I was to be any place in the world and something was to happen, it'd be Israel.
Yeah.
There's
I would
no
be the
doubt
best
that
place to be.
it absolutely is dangerous. But you're talking about being in a land that God said, I've got this.
It's
And
the end of the ages right
Yep.
now.
Yep.
And it's like a front seat. But then again, I guess that's the difference between men and women.
Yeah.
Women protect the hearth, and men are stupid. It's also why women live longer.
And be with and follow the remaining Jews that are going to survive, because they're headed to
How about
Mount
you, Ryan?
Ryan, you going?
You going or staying? He's staying.
Oh man, what's wrong with you, man?
Smart boy.
He's like, wait a minute. I've got.
I thought I
got a
trained
woman
that
to
boy
marry, and I've got kids to have, and I don't
done
want to be
all
going
that.
over there. And
Bachelor to the Rapture here. If you would like to go, or if you would or wouldn't go, all expenses paid. Your work's taken care of. You come back. You come
If you
back.
go,
just
you
your
can
life.
get one of these right
If
here.
you were alive, would you go? Yay or nay? Tell us in the comment section down below.
Yay.
We love you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.